This conference will now be recorded.
My apologies for
I
that.
ask if you're not speaking to please mute. Okay, thank you.
Hey, Chris, you're echoing. Every time you say something, you echo,
Right.
just so you know.
Yes, ma'am. Someone else has their mic live and I'm coming off of their speakers. And now it's not happening, so great. Welcome everybody to the April 2021 all members meeting. My name is Chris McAllister and I'm the chair. I'd like to have everybody do quick introductions. If you're a board member and an elected, please go first.
Pat Farr, Board of County Commissioners, member.
Lucy Dennis, Mayor of Eugene.
Deborah Daly, Eugene Forte, and St. Vincent de Paul.
Lori Trigger, Lane County Commissioner, alternate. Cliff Harold, Sheriff.
Julie
Thank you for the
oh, sorry.
Thank you for the electeds. Can we please have the lived experience voices introduce themselves?
Tiff Smith, Youth Lived Experience Representative.
Chris McAllister, Adult Lived Experience Representative. And can we please get the providers and other members of the board to introduce themselves?
Hi, this is Noreen Donald.
Partner.
Sorry, Cheryl.
Brittany Quick, Warner Eugene Chamber of Commerce, business representative member.
Rick Kincaid, Community Health Centers.
Malia Myers, Looking Glass.
Tim Black, St. Vincent de Paul, Homeless Emergency Services.
Sean Murphy, Mental Health Representative, Laurel Hill Center.
Michelle Hankus, Shelter Care.
Julie Wiesman, Women's Space, Victim Services Rep.
I see Noreen joined us.
Yeah, Noreen Donald's with United Way. Sorry, I think I interrupted somebody earlier.
No sweat. And do we have any city staff, county staff available on the call?
Alex Dreher, Lane County staff.
James Ewell, Lane County staff.
Amanda Borda, Lane County staff.
Ray Johnson, Lane County and City of Eugene staff.
Steve Manella, Lane County Human Services Manager.
Erin Fifield, City of Springfield staff.
And I believe I see Brooke here too. So looks like we have a full contingency. Thank you everybody for being here today. Let's go immediately into our minutes and our approve the minutes for February 18th, 2021. If there's any modifications, please let it be known now. Otherwise, I seek a motion and a second.
Cliff Harold, move approval.
Second.
So that's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Not hearing any. All four, please signify by saying aye or
Aye.
thumbs up on the camera.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Let's talk about membership and strategic plan, please. Oh, it was Sheriff Harold who nominated and then Dr. Kincaid who seconded, I believe.
All right, thank you. Alex Dreher with Lane County. I am going to give a membership and strategic plan update. So we currently have 2 vacancies for the coordinated care organizations, Trillium and Pacific Source. And Debbie Farr has applied to be the representative from Trillium. You had her application in your packet. So if you would like to add Debbie Farr as the Trillium representative to the Poverty and Homelessness Board, you would need to vote on that today. And before you get into that, an update on the strategic plan. So the executive committee has discussed the poverty and homelessness strategic plan because our current one was from 2016 to 2021. That means we have another one coming up. And so the executive committee has discussed hiring a strategic plan consultant to help us neutrally facilitate the strategic planning process. And the executive committee members have worked on a scope of work, and right now it's in the hands of staff to revise and take into consideration their discussion and move on from there. So that's the update. If you're interested in reviewing the strategic plan scope of work, please let me know. You can say so in the chat and I'll make sure you're invited to any planning meetings. And Chair, or members, do I hear any movement on accepting Debbie Farr's application?
I make a motion to approve Debbie Farr as the Trillium CCO representative.
I'll second that, Lucy Venice.
Chair, an announcement, please.
Yes, sir, of course. Discussion.
I will announce a potential conflict of interest since Debbie Farr is a household member with me. However, I do not perceive an actual conflict of interest, so I will participate in the vote.
Thank you very much, sir. Is there any further discussion before we move to approve Debbie Farr as the Trillium representative? Hearing none, I'd like to call a vote to acknowledge that Debbie Farr is the newest member of the PHB. All signify by saying aye or thumbs up.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, welcome Debbie to the Poverty and Homelessness Board. Thank you for your service with Trillium, and we hope to hear your voice.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. We have Pacific Source working out their situation, and so hope to hear from them soon. Is there any other comments regarding membership or strategic plan update?
Chris, can I just add, please, Chair? Pacific Source is going through an interview process this week and probably next week. So just know it probably will be May or maybe even June. But I just heard it from a colleague of mine, and so just wanted you to be aware that it'll probably be another month or so before there's a representative from Pacific Source.
Awesome. Thank you, Noreen, for that update. If we have no other actions, oh, yes.
I just have a question about, and maybe it's something I can just connect with Alex offline. As a new member, I'm not familiar with the process for the strategic plan. I don't know if it just comes back to this group kind of in full form and then it's adopted, or if there's input from the group. I don't want to take us down a rabbit hole, but that's information I'd love to have, even if it's offline.
Thank you, Brittany. I do know that we will be reaching out to update new members on what we have done. We have traditionally done the strategic plan in a committee itself, but last year we brought it to the whole board to look at. And this year, since we're renewing our strategic plan, there's going to be a consulting effort and whatnot. I'd be happy to show you where we went and also have staff share what they are currently working on, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, super helpful.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to ask Mayor Venice to give us a brief update about what's going on this week for Eugene.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. I first of all appreciate getting this a position on the agenda because the City of Eugene, made a pretty big commitment this week. And you all know we have rolled out an urban camping policy in order to try to create a little sense of consistency and order and safety around the really proliferation of people who are living in our parks and open spaces and rights of way. And we have two very large sites at Washington Jefferson Park and at 13th. And so the staff has moved forward, recognizing this is an ongoing challenge, finding safe spots. And so they came to council and council approved a proposal to create 300 new tent spaces and 200 new car camping spaces And these would be on sites that the city would be able to either lease or purchase. So the idea is to be able to provide some designated sites in terms of the tent spaces. They could be divided up, that number of tents divided up between 4 to 8 locations. The car camping sites, 2 to 4 sites. You know, we would want to attach some services to them. And so I put this before this board, not for a decision, for an information point, because this, you know, could be an opportunity to extend some kind of navigation services at those sites, and could kind of integrate ultimately with the counties, with our improvement in coordinated entry and sort of getting those folks into the system. So I think our goal is that camping is not the final solution, but safe camping is, it can be a stepping stone to something better. And you all have heard me talk before about the need for a more robust outreach system to the folks who are living in our public spaces. But this, I think, could be the beginning of an extension of how we're looking at that. So we're very excited. It's a big commitment, and the vote by council on Monday night puts oh, I should say one other thing is that the city has established a unified command team. So it's an interdisciplinary team, the way we had a unified command team in response to the pandemic, so that the whole city staff team is on board in terms of how we wrap our arms around this, the challenge of the number of people who are unsheltered. And so this vote by council enables that team also to go out and actually try to finalize some, either the acquisition or the leasing of property that we could use to provide more stable sites for people. So big step forward, and more news to follow. But you know, 500 additional safe sleeping spots is a significant jump in our capacity.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. And if I remember correctly, it was an 8-0 vote. And so
it was a unanimous vote. Council was all on. So I think a lot of good. There was I mean, I encourage any of you to just watch that, some part of that, at least the step, because they really did a great job of sort of setting this up in a way that they felt was manageable. And I see that Deborah Daly is raising her hand.
Yes, go ahead, Deborah.
Thank you. Lucy, I was wondering if you could just briefly tell us what services might be provided on those sites, just briefly.
Yeah, well, you know, my expectation around this is that we would be modeling it on the urban camping policies that we currently have. So we would be working with providers who are extending medical care, behavioral health care. You know, we're going to be obviously making available sanitation and having these be more established sites for you know, a couple of years really enables us to invest a little bit more in what, you know, what the water supply is and what the bathroom facilities are. So you know, there more, I mean, some of it is contingent on funding, and that this is out for a public hearing later this month. And so there are dollars attached to it, and some of this is determined, you know, what dollars are there. But the goal is that these are managed sites, that they're safe sites and they're managed sites, and they provide sort of basic needs for people.
Thank
you. We have one more question, and thank you, Deborah, for the question. It looks like Brittany had a hand raised, and then we'll go into our next portion.
I was going to ask again.
Oh, sorry. I can only see 7 pictures. So maybe we can have it to where people go show present if speaking. How would we do that? So, or is there a better way to see all the pictures?
Yeah, Pat was up before me. You go, Pat.
Okay.
Brittany, mine's going to take about 40 minutes, so go ahead. No, I'm kidding. But you go ahead anyway. I just have a clarification question, please.
I was just going to say that we really appreciate your leadership on this, Mayor Venice, that the Eugene Chamber has been working really closely with the city staff on the siting of these locations. We met with them on Tuesday after the council meeting. We have another meeting with them on Friday. My hope is to convene about 40 businesses and property owners who I've, been collecting over the last 3 months, who are very concerned with this issue, and to meet with them hopefully next week to kind of lay out what's happening and what the need is, and that we have to find sites, and that hopefully from the business perspective, something that will benefit them is that we'll be able to move some of the illegal campers that are causing some pretty big concerns with some of the businesses specifically in the West Eugene area. So we're moving with the city staff, and I just really appreciate your leadership, and Brooke too from Eugene, that you're moving as quickly as you can. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your support on that.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it brief. Mayor Vinnis, this is a pretty impressive and fairly aggressive move by the city of Eugene. Looking forward to coordinating work with Lane County. My question is regarding the Office of the Joint Housing and Shelter Strategist, which is Sarai Johnson. Can you talk a little bit about the coordination with Sarai's office and the outreach that Lane County provides also?
Well, we are, we have taken a step, as you know, part of the TAC report recommendation was increased outreach. We rolled some of that out. The city had some relief funds that we did apply towards the first outreach, and that has passed through the county. And so I'm hoping that that our public agencies combined can gradually expand our investment in outreach. And I think there is a possibility for these two settled sites to be sort of a first step out, in which together we figure out county navigation systems, funding. I think we're all concerned about the capacity of our provider organizations and the need both for them to have sustained funding and sustained workforce. So I'm very interested in exploring those two aspects of this as well, how we can, really recognizing, as I've said before, we are going to be facing a level of humanitarian crisis here for a prolonged period of time. It's not going to be resolved in 6 months or a year. And so we really need to be thinking about how we can sustain our service to that number of people who are struggling. I will also say just a quick thing, which is the council also, sort of referring to Brittany's comments about the business complaints, we have had some pretty serious increase, I think, in criminal behavior. And so part of the goal here is, provide housing and services or shelter and services to people who want and need that. And then it helps us target the work that our police force needs to do on the criminal activity.
Mayor Vinnis, thank you very much. And Chair, I'll just say this, that the coordination between Lane County and the city of Eugene really is functioning. And as you say, this is a step that is going to take us down a long road. So I'm looking forward to the working together on this, Mayor, and outstanding work. My gosh, stepping out like this and making certain that we're getting geographic distribution is particularly important. So thank you very much. And I see that as Brian has commented in the chat box, if you may all want to read that.
Chair McAllister, Commissioner Trigger, may I make a brief comment?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Commissioner Farr, just to piggyback on that, and Brittany's comments as well around citing. And I now see Sarai's comment, but I'm absolutely ready and available and interested in being part of those conversations around citing to find that balance between dispersing sites in a way that doesn't overly burden any one particular area of the community, but that also works for the folks that are residing there in terms of access to transportation services and their own jobs and other resources. So very interested in being part of that as one of the two commissioners representing Eugene, and already working a lot with many of our neighborhood associations to help keep that conversation productive. Thanks.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I would like to just as we move on to the next item, just share that Brooke Freed said that the public hearing is on April 26th, and that's important for council to hear from the community regarding what's being proposed. So Thank you, everybody. Can we move forward on the coordinated entry item with Mr. James?
Thanks, Chris. Hi there, everybody. So yeah, as noted, we are aiming to convene a coordinated entry stakeholder group, hopefully within the next few weeks, to solicit feedback and really create a shared vision for coordinated entry improvements moving forward. Through conversations we've already had with service providers, as well as recommendations from the TAC report, we've already identified some areas that we're hoping to improve, and we have started working on some of those. One of the primary ones is, working towards eliminating buckets for referrals. So that means rather than simply putting someone on either a rapid rehousing list or a permanent supportive housing list, instead making all those resources available, regardless of a score that they receive on the SPDAT. And so doing that will allow us to really more quickly refer folks to housing that's available, and avoid those buckets where someone with a mid-level SPDAT score that's too high for rapid rehousing, but really not high enough to prioritize them for permanent supportive housing, where folks like that just sit on the list. So we're really hoping to see movement with these improvements. Additionally, earlier this month, we implemented an ongoing case conferencing meeting, both with service providers, but both for single adults as well as for families. And really, moving forward, case conferencing is going to be critically important to this system of moving away from sending housing referrals based solely on an assessment score, and instead really taking into account the unique needs of each household. And it's really the service providers that are going to be able to lead those conversations based on the clients that they're working with. We're also interested in moving towards what's called a phased assessment process. And that's where unhoused folks, they aren't just automatically referred to do a front door assessment when they show up at a homeless service provider, but instead they're assessed as to whether a different intervention, such as rapid resolution or diversion, if that might be a quicker way to end their homelessness without resulting in needing to add them to the coordinated entry list, which, as you all know, is long and is slow moving. So back in February, providers were trained on rapid resolution and diversion practices, and we're really hopeful to implement that practice system-wide moving forward. And additionally, as we move towards a phased assessment, it's likely going to involve moving away from scheduled front door assessments at front door sites, and instead utilizing something like a cognito form or some other way of alerting a team of assessors when there's someone identified as needing an FDA, and then that team can go out and address that need immediately. So looking forward to moving in that direction. And really lastly, ensuring that the coordinated entry system is racially equitable. That needs to be a priority of ours moving forward. As I'm sure some of you know, Org Code, who actually created this SPDAT back in January, they are recommending that communities phase out the use of the SPDAT and move to a new assessment tool. And that's largely based around concerns that were raised around racial equity issues. So a goal of this stakeholder committee will be to identify a new assessment process moving forward, and one that really specifically takes into account the unique barriers that are faced by BIPOC and other marginalized populations. So the hope for this group is to have members that represent a really wide range of perspectives. Definitely want to include service providers, folks with lived experience, and I think it'll be really important specifically to have folks that have been through the coordinated entry process. Their voice is going to be really important. BIPOC populations, city and county staff, other community members, that are just interested in coordinated entry. I'm really interested in having them be a part of that. And as these improvements are proposed, we likely will need input from this board regarding changes to that system. I think especially as we implement a new assessment tool to replace the SPDAT, and likely some of the new processes that will go along with the phased assessment approach, we will need input from this board. So all that being said, if you're interested in being part of this group, I'm going to drop my email in the chat. Please reach out and let me know. And if any of you have any questions either about this stakeholder group or about any of the things I discussed, I will gladly take those questions now.
Alex, do you want to keep cute? Because I can only see 6 people. anybody who,
Yes, sorry.
if there's
I don't-
anybody who has questions, this would be a good time. James, I heard that we have. Hold on.
I only
Yield to Alex.
I don't see anyone who would like to speak.
Okay. What do we have current? Thank you, Alex. What do we have currently, James? Coordinated referral process, and we're going to coordinated entry now.
I mean, I think the system is called coordinated entry, and as it stands now, we're really primarily using the SPDAT as the referral tool. So putting a lot into what a household screens SPDAT as determining which program they get referred to. And I think we really want to move towards using standardized assessment as a piece of the puzzle, but not the determining factor. And instead using things like case conferencing and a phased assessment approach to really get a clearer picture about what housing program would be the best fit to address unique needs that everybody has.
Awesome. Well, unless there's any last minute questions, I'd like to move on to the next item. I thank you, James, for your contributions on this work and carving out some new stuff, and all the staff that are supporting on this effort. Excellent. Thank you, Alex. So it looks like we are prepared to have our Jacob Fox and Paul Solomon presentation. Are both of those folks here?
I'm here on the phone. Can people hear and see me? Is that
I can
yes?
hear you.
Great.
Affirmative, Paul.
Yes.
Okay. And Laura Johnson, sponsors Director of Program Development, is also going to be presenting with us today. So I will kick it off, and we're going to talk today about a project that we presented to you a couple of years ago when we were in the early stages of development. And we're calling it The Way Home. It's a permanent supportive housing project for people with criminal histories who are released from state custody, homeless and indigent, and are assessed at higher risk to re-engage with the criminal justice system. Next slide, please. So this project is a partnership between sponsors, Homes for Good, and Lane County Parole and Probation. And we came together in 2016 along with Third Sector, an intermediary that works on pay for success projects, to apply for a Department of Justice and HUD grant. And we were one of 7 jurisdictions nationwide that were awarded a $1.3 million planning grant to launch a project to provide permanent supportive housing for the population that I mentioned. Jacob, you want to say anything else about the partnership?
Sure. Thanks, Paul. I guess for me, I really want to just give respect and thanks to sponsors because of Paul and Laura's leadership and other members of the sponsors team. Homes for Good kind of has made a pivotal decision to focus on serving people in the community that are most marginalized. So there's kind of 2 ways that we can approach serving people that need a housing resource in the community. We can do it in a general way by opening up waiting lists and receiving 10,000 applicants over a 10-day period of time. That's kind of the historic way of doing business. But really, in this partnership with sponsors was really compelling that Homes for Good needs to target its resources in a much more intentional way. And really, this project allowed us to do that. But also, it's really focused our organization on developing more permanent supportive housing and creating priorities and preferences for our existing housing for folks that are returning to Lane County from prison or folks that are experiencing chronic homelessness. And I think our permanent supportive housing project, the Commons on MLK, which is moving towards 100% occupancy by the end of May. The 13th and Tyler project that will target homeless families Those projects were made possible because Lane County donated land for both of those projects. So one of the things I want to just plant the seed on for this group is that land to develop affordable housing is really challenging and expensive to acquire. So we really need local jurisdictions to continue to step up and convey land so we can develop more permanent supportive housing. A couple, like one primary example is the Naval Reserve site that's owned by the city of Eugene. We think that that's the most viable parcel for affordable housing development that could serve sponsors, clients, or people experiencing chronic homelessness or other specialized populations in the community. So again, we wouldn't be where we are in terms of delivering permanent supportive housing if it wasn't for sponsors educating us and encouraging us to do business differently. So Paul, it's been an honor to work with you on this project, and I think everybody's going to be really blown away by the outcomes that were achieved through the project.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. It really has been an amazing project, and the fact that we were able to pull this off when we did, I think really speaks to the value of the partnership. I mean, we were the smallest jurisdiction by far that got awarded this grant. The other jurisdictions included LA County, Austin, Texas, Prince George's County, and DC. So I think the fact that we were able to do this really speaks to the value and the experience that we bring to this partnership. If we move to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about exactly what the intervention is and how we've been able to pull it off. So in the HUD DOJ NOFA, there was a 100-unit minimum requirement for this grant solicitation. And at the time, we were well into construction of the Oaks at 14th, which provided 54 units of permanent supportive housing. This is also a Housing First project. In addition, Homes for Good stepped up and provided an additional equivalent of 46 units in the form of public housing and Section 8 vouchers to get us to the 100-unit minimum. Originally, this was developed as a traditional pay-for-success project where you use social impact bonds and investor dollars on the front end to pay for an intervention that is then paid for by local or state government with interest. Pretty quickly, we realized that that is a very complicated and cumbersome model, and we wanted to morph to an outcomes-oriented contract, which is based on the achievement of very specific and agreed-upon metrics. And in our case, the metrics that we wanted to evaluate for this project were reductions in recidivism, addressing homelessness as evidenced by having a stable lease, and more appropriate utilization of Medicaid dollars. So looking at emergency room outcomes, inpatient stays, and other Medicaid metrics to see if we're driving down or if we're actually realizing a more appropriate utilization of Medicaid dollars. So let's move to the next slide. And I think at this point, I'm going to kick it over to Laura to talk about a little more in depth about the metrics that we're evaluating and the outcomes that we've seen. We're currently at the 2-year mark of a 3-year longitudinal study with a control group. And we've served, in total, we agreed to serve 125 people over a 3-year period. And at the 2-year mark, we've just about hit that mark. So I think I'll kick it over to Laura for further analysis.
Sure, thanks. So as Paul indicated, the goal was to provide integrated case management to 125 people who were releasing from the Department of Corrections to homelessness and who are at very high, assessed as being high risk to become re-engaged with the system without additional supports.
We also, as part of this project, are engaged in a very rigorous evaluation, third-party evaluation conducted by researchers from NYU and the University of Oregon. And so we needed to establish some pretty specific structures around how that evaluation would operate, and to essentially establish a treatment group and a comparison group. I'm not going to call it a control group because it's not a randomized control trial. We wanted to ensure that people who were the most vulnerable and at highest risk were the people who were receiving the services. We didn't find it ethical to randomize people into groups for the purpose of this project. So also with that, we people, if they were enrolled in the project and were not able to be placed in housing within 6 months of their release date from prison, then they were placed in the comparison group. If they were able to be placed in housing within that 6-month window prior to release or post-release, then they're enrolled in the treatment group. So when we look at what the performance metrics are for this, it's the external evaluator who is conducting interviews with all of the participants, but also doing some analysis in collaboration with the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission, Homes for Good, and sponsors and other property managers to ensure that the individual remains stably housed, and to assess whether that person has been convicted of a new felony offense. And they're doing that at the 6 months, 12-month, and 18-month period following their placement in housing. Let's see.
You can move to the next slide.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. And this is, so Paul indicated, yeah, we're basically at the 30-month mark now, so about 2.5 years in, but our assessment is based on 2 years. So we have placed 125 individuals in permanent supportive housing as of April 1st. And of those, based on the most recent assessment, 94.5% remain stably housed and have not been convicted of a new felony offense. And that is a very, very, very promising and high standard. If the baseline prior to launch of this project, 33% of folks who returned to Lane County were reincarcerated within 3 years. So we have exceeded the target benchmark that we established for ourselves to reduce recidivism by 70%. The housing placements for this project are really quite varied, and I think that's one of the other things that I has made it a bit challenging, but also I think particularly rewarding and flexible. As Paul mentioned, we have housing 54 one-bedroom units at the Oaks at 14th, and then through the generosity and collaboration with Homes for Good, we also have access, local preference for certain public housing units as they become available, some affordable housing units, and then also Section 8 vouchers that we've been able to utilize both to subsidize affordable housing units and sponsors long-term housing units, but also to subsidize access to private market units. And this has really enabled us to think about individuals. What are their needs? What are their family structures? Where are they seeking to live and work within the community? It's also enabled us to serve people with a variety of needs and barriers. We have some people who are much more successful and poised to access the private market than other people who have some of the most difficult conviction histories that mean that their options are fairly limited. One other important aspect of this project, I think, to mention is that we don't make any restrictions on eligibility based on the nature of someone's conviction. Anyone with any type of conviction history is eligible for the project. The type of housing and the type of subsidy that becomes available to them can change based on what that conviction history looks like. But the project does not discriminate in that fashion, which I think is also very unique for projects like this, particularly those that partner with PHAs. So if you look at the placement types, you can see what the, just sort of the different orientations and also sort of the number of individuals that we've placed in each of those placements. And I think it's particularly noteworthy that 20% are living in private market units. And that's, I think, one of the biggest successes of this project. We really struggled when we first had, we didn't have a lot of turnover at the Oaks or in public housing initially, and we had the vouchers, and really struggled quite a bit to figure out how to successfully advocate and break in to a market that has a 2% vacancy rate and is flooded with very highly qualified applicants seeking housing. And I think with collaboration and guidance from the housing liaisons at Homes for Good and other staff there, we really were able to develop a strategy that I think will lead us toward long-term success there. And this slide provides an overview of the different types of services that are provided through the program. Because it's a housing first supportive housing project, there is no requirement to engage in services. We utilize assertive engagement techniques to develop rapport and provide support to program participants. And when we do understand their needs, and we do conduct various assessments and such, but any sort of referrals are strictly based on what we would recommend and not on any requirements. The one caveat, however, is that everyone in this project is on active supervision, active correctional supervision. So there are requirements that are part of the terms of their supervision, which you'll see in this middle category. But anything else on this page is really what is available and what we seek to connect people to as we understand needs and barriers, and try to take a very individualized approach to serving this population.
And so I think we'll wrap up here, and I'll kick it back over to Jacob for final comments. But one of the things that I just want to reinforce is the impact of this project. Having served 125 people who are assessed at high risk to re-engage in the system, we know the recidivism rates here in Oregon are at around 33%. Having reduced recidivism by the amounts that we have is just phenomenal. And what that means in terms of system savings for each person that re-engages in the criminal justice system and returns to prison, the average cost is $100,000. And that, when you multiply that over a course of years, at $85 a day in prison, it gets very expensive. And the fact that we're able to keep these folks stably housed, I think, speaks to the importance and the value of permanent supportive housing. Jacob?
I would just say that we'll be doing more projects like this with sponsors and then other supportive services providers in the community. I think we need to be really proactive, and as I said, land for affordable housing development is super critical. There is going to be waves of new money that will be available to our community to do interventions like this through federal stimulus, through a federal infrastructure package. And if we're not prepared as a community with land at the ready to develop more housing like this, we're going to be in reaction mode. And we as a community do not need to be in reaction mode, because we have the experience in development, we have the experience in supportive services to really expand housing options far beyond what's available today. I mean, 5.5% of the folks struggled in their housing, which is a good reminder that 94.5% were successful. And I would just echo what Paul said. That is an incredible metric for the population of people that are re-entering our community after successfully completing their prison sentence.
Thank you very much, Jacob and Paul. As is there any closing statements you want to give on this project, or is there any ask that you'd like to make before I and other people give comment?
No, I think we're good.
Awesome. Well, I will ask my question real quick, and I see that Lucy is in queue. So my question is, given that that small number of recidivism is so small, was there a particular overarching crime or issue that led to that recidivism, or that might be able to be better supported in the 2.0 version of this?
I'm not quite sure I understand your question, Chris. So
of the 5% who made who of the 5% who, yes.
Yeah.
So was it sex crimes? Was it theft? Was it murder? Is there a way that we can engage with better dialed supports to make that number go down to 3 or to 2 or to net 0?
Mm-hmm.
I can speak to that. So I should clarify that 94%, 4.5%, so that 5% that were not successful, that includes people who, you had to be stably housed and not re-convicted to be considered successful. So we actually have only 2% of individuals who have become reincarcerated. And the other folks are just folks who are no longer stably housed. There is not one, it's a very small population. So I'll say that. And there isn't one through line, I could say, that is consistent for across the individuals who have returned. The one thing I can say is that there remains a strong need for behavioral health support. I know that has been a component for a couple of the people, and something that we provide in our program, but that we continue to find a dearth of resources, adequate resources in our community.
Thank you very much, Laura, for this, and Jacob and Paul. I have Mayor Venice, followed by Sean Murphy, followed by Pat Farr.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you and congratulations. It's a phenomenal program, and you're right, it is such a validation of the value of permanent supportive housing and what a difference it makes in people's lives. And I think, yes, we talk about the money we save and the money we save in the system, but it's really that we're saving the lives. And you think about the churning experiences that people have when they just churn through homelessness, repeated episodes and chronic homelessness, and the barriers that this particular population faces. And I'm just grateful to you for that work. I remember when you gave the first presentation to the PHB, when you first put the proposal together. So it's really gratifying and wonderful to hear how successful it has been. I also just wanted to follow up on Jacob's comments about land and land availability and say that the city and the county are working very closely to identify sites and to figure out which sites can be used best for what purposes. So that could apply to the Naval Reserve site as well. We're looking at, purchasing sites through increased CDBG funds. We're looking at these shelter sites, the car camping and the tent sites as kind of a land banking program, that if we have access to them, that they could ultimately become sites where we could transition into a more permanent housing setting. So I think that we are at a moment of time where we have an opportunity to actually build up our land supply so that we can move these projects forward more quickly. So we're with you on that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor
Sean?
Venice.
I just wanted to say congratulations, guys, great effort. And, just to make a comment, because in our supportive housing services, what we realize is, and we've had similar numbers with success, and a lot of it is about having the resource available when the person is motivated. And so it really speaks to the need of us to have housing and other resources so that when people are actually ready and desiring to make changes in their life, we have somewhere to put them and to add those supports so that they can do that, and that they don't have to wait on a waiting list or other other things that drag on. And a lot of times, reduce hope, people's feeling hopeful about being able to make change. And the other thing that I want to say is, with the rate, we also have to realize, especially with behavioral health and addiction, is that recovery is not linear for most people. So they'll have their ups and their downs and their ups and their downs. And so we probably won't ever get to one. It would be great, but to get to 100%, everybody's going to be successful. It doesn't really, match the recovery process as we know with behavioral health issues. But I think that's the other piece why working together as a continuum is so important, because, if they blow out of housing, it's really good that we have a shelter or Ascension campsite or, outreach workers just to pick right up with that person when they're out of that housing, and to be there and be ready to work with them until they're ready to start again. And so this whole thing is just making me feel really hopeful about where we're going as a community.
Thanks, Sean. I couldn't agree with you more. I think the importance of being able to provide these interventions when people need them, and with the population we're serving, the day people are released from custody, being able to offer housing to them is critical in their ability to work on, a vertical integration housing model that moves people through the various stages. And it's one of the things that, in my mind, if we could do anything, it would be to replicate these models so that we are casting a much wider net, because, this is in many ways the tip of the iceberg. We could replicate this project many times over and continue to fill these units.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Sean. Commissioner Farr.
Well, thank you, Chair, for putting me in the queue after Sean Murphy. How do I follow that? Thanks, Sean. There were 3 points that I wanted to touch on, and then a quick statement. Paul, you said the average cost of individual recidivism or reentry into the system is $100,000. Is that, did I write that down accurately?
Yeah, approximately, for each person that recidivates and goes back to prison here in Oregon.
That's a good number for us all to remember. And the second is the one that we touch on quite often. It's a statement of yours, Jacob. Land is super critical, and there'll be waves of money available, but we have to be ready. We have to have shovel ready or land ready to rock and roll. We know that, and we are beginning to work on it, but really it becomes more and more important once we get into a position where there is potentially a relatively large amount of outside money that could come in and help us with the projects. Because our projects here, Jacob and Paul and Laura, are looked at by the entire nation because of the coordination that occurs right here in our community. So, back in 1995, when I first became a Eugene City Councilor, Abe Farkas and Richie Weinman took me on a tour of the land bank sites in Eugene, inside the city of Eugene. It's a pretty substantial list. Well, that list is no longer there, and it's become even more critical today because we do have opportunity to build. And when we do have opportunity to build, I wanted to really focus on this, Jacob and Paul and Laura. The coordination of effort that happens among particularly these 2 agencies, sponsors and Homes for Good, is unprecedented. People see what you're doing together and they wonder how they can do it. Well, it's in no small part because we have 2 very visionary directors and a fantastic staff making things happen. It really is highly impressive. The third is something that really is a result of that, the fact that we are working together. And this is something you said, Paul, that Lane County was by far the smallest community to receive the Way Home grant. And you mentioned LA and Austin. Well, once again, that's an example of you working together to leverage far more than 1 + 1. 1 + 1 equals way more than 2 in this situation. And remind everyone that this meeting is being televised, will be repeated on cable access, and that really we need to let the people know who support the work that we do, the people in the community, what the outstanding leverage is that occurs between these 2 agencies. I could say a lot more, Chair, but the work is obvious. The slides are obvious. Just remarkable what you've done, not just today, but with the Oaks at 14th and other projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And again, thank you everybody who's worked so hard on this project. Here's to having more like it, and here's to meeting those needs like what Sean mentioned, that we do need to have services available for people, and that people are on a journey, and sometimes we make pit stops, and sometimes we have to get back on the road. So this is a project that speaks to that because it takes us home. So thank you for the presentation. And I believe if anybody has questions, please reach out to Jacob or to Paul, and they will answer more questions. So we have Amanda Borda up with some standards.
All right, thank you. So you have the document that Alex just had up on the screen, the Lee County Program Standards, in your packet. So I'm not going to go through the full document. It's pretty long for this. So I've just prepared a few slides just to sort of cover the highlights, what you'll see in there, and sort of what this means going forward. And I will say this says rapid rehousing written standards, but the document really applies across program models. But really the rapid rehousing written standards were kind of the impetus for getting this started. So, all right. So overall, the goals of the written standards, we are required by HUD to have rapid rehousing written standards for COC and ESG funded projects. And really what they do is bring together our basic HUD regulations with our local policies and processes. So HUD really sets a basic minimum standard for rapid rehousing and minimum expectations, and then they expect from there that COCs and communities will sort of develop a more nuanced approach that works for them locally. So we've really been following essentially the minimum standards, and this is really our opportunity to kind of expand on that and really design it more locally. And this is really part of getting going with our TAC recommendations around rapid rehousing as well. So really what the standards will do is ensure that rapid rehousing and really all other of our program models are administered consistently, transparently, and effectively. So as we've mentioned previously in the meeting, these programs pull from our coordinated entry CWL list. And so the clients themselves don't necessarily have a choice. They get referred to a program. They can certainly choose not to take it, but we really refer them and match them with a program. And so we really want to expect that all of across our rapid rehousing and across our permanent supportive housing, that those are operating fairly consistently. And that the way that they operate is transparent and visible to everyone. And hopefully this will also allow for our programs to be more effective in terms of our outcomes. So our process, Lane County staff, primarily me, developed these draft standards with some input from additional staff as well. We've also gathered service provider input as well as other stakeholders. This has also been brought to League, our lived experience group, for some input. And really this process started sort of way back a couple of years ago, actually. And we kind of put it on hold due to COVID. We were working on other things, so we're kind of picking up back up. So some of these meetings started way back then. We also brought a more recent draft to our rapid rehousing service providers more recently, as well as League. So this has been reviewed, and then there was a period for additional comment from those folks after incorporating changes. And then we're bringing it to the PHB today in hopes that we will get approval for this document moving forward. And then from there, what we hope to do is provide training and additional resources so that we can effectively implement the new standards starting in July. But we know there will be sort of a build-up process for providers to get on board and get everything they need to implement them. And then the plan is to kind of revise as we need, and it's expected that we'll do that at least annually, if not more. So what you'll see within that document is for rapid rehousing, but for other program models as well, we will be adding gradually. You'll see essential elements. So basically what are the minimum essential elements to operate this program, as well as standard performance measures. In addition, for rapid rehousing, you'll see we need to determine the type, amount, and duration of assistance. So I'll talk more about that, as well as our participant contribution level. HUD doesn't necessarily define that for rapid rehousing, so we have to define that locally. And then we hope to bring in, you'll see some for rapid rehousing here, standards for case management, housing search, and other services. We also anticipate having more broad standards around case management that other Lane County staff are working on as part of our tenancy support goals under the TAC recommendations. And then overall, you also see COC policies and guiding principles. So as we approve gradual here and there ad hoc policies, this is kind of a document where we can catch all of that. And it sort of operates as a program manual in that way. And then it also has guiding principles and sort of core values that we're going to be following across programs, regardless of program model. So those are things like housing first, trauma-informed care, equity and inclusion, those types of things that apply across the board. So I won't get into too much of this part. The essential elements are really the standard regulations, so none of those are new. There will also be a link to sort of some recommended elements through the National Alliance has defined recommended sort of standards around landlord engagement, staffing levels, best practices, and then payment standards and tracking for rapid rehousing. These are not things we've elaborated on at this point locally, but we've linked to sort of what those national standards are. And I hope that as we sort of start rolling these out, we can dive more deep into these topics as well locally. Eligibility and prioritization just reflects what it currently is in our system. That has not changed. Since I'm limited on time, I'm going super quickly, but I'll try to highlight sort of what's new. One thing we really needed to define is standards around the limits to service and the maximum amount and number of months that may be provided. And so after a lot of discussion, what we've kind of landed on is a maximum of 18 months of assistance for most. The regulatory max is 24 months, but basically we're setting the goal that most people should be able to achieve that housing stability in 18 months. And certainly they can be approved on case-by-case basis for the additional 6 months. But at that point, we're really concerned that they might not achieve that housing stability through rapid rehousing and may need to really work towards connecting to long-term subsidies at that point. So the focus sort of shifts at that point to making sure they have something to continue on to. And I think we still have some work to do in terms of how we formalize those connections to vouchers and other opportunities in our community. And then we really define that participants can receive 24 months of rapid rehousing assistance in any 3-year period. So it sort of puts a boundary on it. The other piece we really needed to define that we hadn't yet was a participant contribution. For the most part, programs have been operating with a 30% contribution of income towards rent. And that's really regardless of household circumstances. And so what we want to really move to is this more progressive engagement approach. And what that does is really recognize that there is no single predictor of how much assistance someone might need to gain housing stability. And then it's really a strategy of providing really more flexible, individualized assistance and starting out very, very small amount of assistance and only more if needed. And so it's really not providing this sort of standard package. Everybody gets the same thing. It's really more individualized based on their specific housing barriers, based on their household budget and income and other factors. So in terms of the contribution, what we really wanted to do to really reflect that progressive engagement approach is to use a graduated subsidy. So you'll see that it really outlines a step down gradual, but not at set months or a schedule. So it won't be that someone receives a certain amount of assistance for 3 months and then another for another 3 months. It's really based on the individual household and what they might need as they progress through the program with the goal of achieving housing stability in as short amount of time as possible. So folks will be continued to be assessed throughout the time that they're in rapid rehousing. Right now, our minimum is every 12 months, which is a really long time in rapid rehousing world. And so we're sort of shifting that to be more of a continuous reassessment, and households can actually be assessed really on an ongoing basis under a progressive engagement model, but must be reassessed at least every 3 months. So that's definitely a shift. And it's also a shift to using more of a standardized assessment. I didn't include those in your packet. There's a whole sort of appendix of forms that are included here. And I can always send those out if folks are interested. But folks will really be using more of a standardized assessment that will give them sort of an indication of score and an indication of what sort of barriers still exist to housing stability. Like I mentioned, we'll also have standardized performance measures. We've really set these at sort of a national standard at this point, But this is one thing I anticipate will shift as we sort of look at our data a little bit more on a continuous basis and really define locally what our goals are around these metrics. So in terms of next steps, we are looking for PHB approval at this point for this document, and then we hope to provide standard training across all programs, particularly starting with rapid rehousing and making sure that those programs understand what the standards are and how to implement them. And then again, we hope to review, evaluate, and revise annually. And then ongoing from there, we hope for rapid rehousing to do monthly provider meetings or every other month to sort of dive into data, discuss challenges, and provide that sort of provider peer support and offer that more engagement. So that was a whole lot of information in a really short period of time, and I'm gonna just stop sharing my screen real quick. But I know we're living out in time, but if folks have questions, I'm happy to answer any of those.
Appreciate that presentation and the thinking outside the box.
Hey, Chris, I have a question. Sorry, my chat's disappeared. The standards or the outcomes and performance indicators that you talked about, and we were just looking at the rapid rehousing section of this document that was sent out. Is that right?
For the most part, yeah. This document includes several sort of general standards and policies as well, and those apply across the board for the programs. But there will be separate sections for each program model. Right now, it only includes rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, and I think bridge housing is in there as well. But we hope.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we weren't approving it without knowing what those pieces would be. I assume we're just approving the pieces that are in there.
Yes, we will bring it back with addendums as we develop those individual program standards.
Okay, I guess my question about the expected outcomes and performance indicators, are those new numbers? Have they changed at all? Or are those kind of what folks were expecting or have been held to in the past?
Yeah, good question. So they are reflective of how the majority of programs have at least funded through Lane County of what they have been held to in their contracts. I expect that as we move along and as we have better data around rapid rehousing, we will set them sort of in accordance with where we are, not necessarily in sort of setting them at where we are, but just a little bit better so that we can gradually kind of get to where we need to be. I will say we're not near these outcomes at this moment.
So am I understanding that if they aren't meeting those outcomes, does that indicate that they're not eligible for funding?
No, so we do evaluate programs more formally, the COC funded programs annually, and they are held to those metrics, but it doesn't necessarily cause them to not be funded. It might cause them we have to rank our projects, and so it might cause them to rank lower if they're not meeting a higher standard of performance. But that's really the majority of the impact. It could, if they continue to have issues not meeting performance, that would need to be a discussion with the COC about what to do there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the questions, Brittany. Commissioner Farr, are you asked to be next?
Chair, I'm ready to make a motion if you're ready to receive one.
Ready to receive.
Then Amanda, let me know if this is an adequate motion. I move approval of the continuum of care standards as presented at today's continuum of care agency meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second. Deborah Daly.
Okay, discussion, Amanda. Oh, yes, sir. Sorry.
Clarification, Chair. As the PHB, we are in this action acting as the continuum of care agency as required by HUD. Is that correct, Amanda?
Yes.
Thank you.
If the wording of the motion is acceptable, we do have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, I'd like to put the measure to a motion to a vote as spoken by Commissioner Farr. All in favor signify by saying aye or thumbs up.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Amanda, for your hard work on this, and all the staff who have been working on these standards for years, and the people who are having to adhere to them. Is there anything else you need on this item, Amanda?
No, thank you.
Excellent, thank you, ma'am. Do we have?
Ask for
yes, sir.
Just a brief comment. Amanda, from this point, does it go to the Board of County Commissioners for approval to move forward, or is this the final action needed?
My understanding is that this is the final action.
Perfect, thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Commissioner. Let's see here. Do we have next the vaccine update? And we are a time check. It's 1:12, and we go till 1:30, and we have one community comment so far.
The next agenda item is the PHB Shelter Stakeholder Committee Governance Charter.
Okay,
Which would be very, I think.
Thank you very much. Catherine, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. So this is, we're kind of, I think, from my understanding, kind of following up some of the formalizing of the shifts that happened in the Permanent Housing Shelter Committee sort of back at the beginning of COVID time. There was sort of a shift in what that committee was and what the scope of it was. And so we're bringing that back to kind of get that part of it wrapped up. So in the packet, there is a committee charter that was a draft that was sort of already existed that we made some small changes to. And then we also thought it would be a good idea to have this group kind of officially approve the current membership of the group. And then from there, moving forward, we'll follow the membership process that's outlined in the charter. And so I did want to, I had Alex pull the membership list up because there are two changes from this version. So Debbie Farr, given the vote today, is no longer going to be on the shelter subcommittee. And Laurel O'Rourke also stepped down a little bit ago. So it would, we're looking for approval of the charter as it was sent to you, and then the membership list with those two changes. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. Okay.
Do we hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye, or raise your hand, wave to the camera.
Aye.
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 Any nays? All right, so moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next agenda
Yes,
item
thank you.
is, performance standards.
A motion?
All right, can everyone see the Lane County System Performance Measures screen I have up? Just one yes will do?
Yes. Yep.
Great, thank you. I'm going to try to be as quick as possible. I know some of you have heard this presentation in the Human Services Commission. I just want to make sure there's enough time at the end for questions or conversation. So what this is about is the system performance measures, which are derived from our homeless management information data. And these data are entered into our system by 32 agencies and over 250 projects, which I think is 265 now, just because last week happened. So each continuum of care is responsible for selecting the homeless management information system software solution, and the one that we are using is called WellSky. We're using the system to collect client level data on housing services, providing services to homeless individuals in families and people who are at risk of living in poverty. So the average number of records that we have in the system, or active records, is about 45,000 individuals a year, and about just under 200,000 service transactions. And of that, just around 9,000 of the folks who have records in our system do have or are currently experiencing homelessness. I should say the report that I'm referencing is in your packet. It's on pages 44 to 55. So I'm going to quickly go through here. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood what these data are looking at. So one of the things that we look at as a performance measure is the length of time that people stay in shelters. So what we saw this year in 2020, which was October 2019 through September 2020, was that people did experience shorter episodes of homelessness in emergency shelter or transitional housing. But looking at the numbers, we're kind of convinced that this is lower because of COVID-19 and the safety protocols that the agency has put into place. So we'll have to take a look at it in a couple years and see how that trend looks over time. We also look at length of time homeless overall, which is we want to reduce the length of time homeless for people in emergency shelters, transitional housing, or those people enrolled in permanent housing projects that have not yet been housed. And when I say permanent housing, I am referring to rapid rehousing projects and permanent supportive projects. So what we saw this year was the length of time in individuals remaining homeless prior to being housed did increase from the prior year. Again, that could be because we had less opportunities because of COVID. And we also have not really expanded our permanent housing or rapid rehousing significantly, and we had the big reduction in emergency shelter beds. Let's see, reducing returns to homelessness, what used to be called recidivism. This year we saw that fewer people did return to homelessness as measured by street outreach, emergency shelter, transitional housing, and permanent housing stays or activities. So what this is not looking at, it is not looking at our alternative shelter options that Lane County has put in place, which would be car camping, sanctioned camps, those types of programs. The results, we believe, are skewed because we have had less emergency shelter stayers in 2020. And prior to this year, street outreach engagement had declined between 2019 and 2020. So again, this is a long-term view. When we look at this in 2021 or 2022, that should really tell us what's trending, because COVID has definitely shocked the system as far as data is concerned, not to mention the people's experiences. So reducing the number of people experiencing homelessness, obviously this is the big one, but what this number is looking at is this is our point in time count, the top row. So last 2020 was 1,606. The numbers seem low because we're only counting the number of surveys on the night of point in time count. So when you look at our homeless dashboard, where we can see that right now, there's about 3,200 people actively engaged in our system and our community and who are experiencing homelessness. So the better assessment would be if you want to understand what's really on the ground and people and the experiences, to take a look at that homeless dashboard that I've shared several times. It's in Tableau. The second number, this is looking overall in the database, in the homeless management information system, on emergency shelter and transitional housing. So it is not including unhoused or unsheltered people. So this number also, we're looking at such a small group of projects, emergency shelter and transitional, compared to the whole community. It is just not, it's not a really good number to do base any planning or resource allocation on. These are the numbers that would be better to use, and this is from our homeless dashboard that's in Tableau, and I will later put that link in there for you. Again, that's from the Tableau. So the increased incomes, that is an important outcome measure for our projects, but this report only looks at continuum of care projects. It doesn't look at projects that are funded with all of the other funding resources that we have in the county. So what we learned from this information was that the percent of adults who either remained in projects or were in projects and exited, who increased their income, was lower in 2020 than 2019. It was a little slightly higher for stayers, but overall. Because COC projects are prioritized for chronically homeless people with long-term disabling conditions, a wage earning job is often not the goal. Increased income that we see here is usually due to SSI or SSDI COLAs. First-time homelessness. I quote Amanda a lot on this. I think I probably managed to bring it up every meeting, but she said several years ago that the key indicator for predicting homelessness was having been homeless in the past. So trying to help people at that cusp of engagement into the homeless system, really big goal for us. I think this is the key performance measure. And as we expand it to include our whole system, alternative shelters and day access centers, then I think we would get the whole story. This one, however, because it is this required HUD report, is really looking at shelter only. When you look at the Tableau report, you will see inflow and outflow tabs. And this tells you probably a more accurate and real-time story of who is new to our homeless management information system that is appearing on our homeless by name list. We don't show names, we just show aggregated numbers, just FYI. And that would be the indicator to take a look at to understand what is the inflow and outflow in our community. Street outreach placements. This is the goal. This goal is a reminder that street outreach is not just connecting people who are connecting with people who are experiencing homelessness, but helping them navigate through the system into housing, because this measure is people who are in street outreach who exited to permanent housing. In this case, permanent housing is not limited to just our rapid rehousing or our permanent supportive housing projects that are in HMIS, but is to any permanent living situation, living in your own rental, owning, staying permanently with friends or family. But we do see that this went up, so that's a plus. And then finally, shelter and housing permanent placements. And the goal here is for shelter and housing projects in the homeless system to have exits to permanent housing. And the question with this lowered number is, did COVID-19 impact this statistic? And again, a couple years from now, looking at the trend, we'll be able to better understand that. It is hard to address it in the moment because COVID has been such a big deal in our homeless system. That is all I have today. I just want to give you time, if there is discussion or questions, to take advantage of that. I will post the by name list information in the chat again, and you can feel free to reach out to me after. But thank you very much.
We have one, thank you, Lisa, very much for that information. We have one question from Mayor Venice, and then we also have public comment with 5 minutes left. So, Mayor Venice.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chair, and I promise to make this fast. I am so grateful to you, Lisa, for this report and for the way that you present it, of what it tells us and what it doesn't tell us. It's just really, it's excellent work. And I guess my question is really about what it doesn't tell us, because I'm not, you know, I don't know of the 200 people who are sleeping in Washington Jefferson Park, or the folks that we're struggling with out on West 7th. I don't know if those, when you talk about street outreach and when you talk about, I don't know if they're included in the count. And so this is sort of part of my follow-up question as we move forward and talk about sort of outreach and talk about what we've learned through the pandemic, kind of making sure that this works for a HUD report, but in terms of our strategic plan around how many people are out there who are accessing services and need services, and we need to contact with outreach to make sure we wrap our arms around that whole population that I don't know. You would know better than I, Lisa. I don't know who's included in that count. I don't know how many of these sort of new, very grassroots providers that are out there, you know, how much are they reporting into the system? So I'm just feeling very aware that there's an uncertainty here about whether we have our arms around the whole, you know, what don't we know here about who isn't included?
Right, I can briefly address that, but I think this is a great question. Absolutely. The folk generally, and we learned this through this year's point in time unsheltered count, even people who are thought to be not engaged with the homeless management information system were indeed engaged. It was just through another door. They were getting a meal at the dining room. They were picking up a food box at Catholic Community Services. They were getting showers or laundry services at the Eugene service station, even though they were at Washington Park, where the people who are providing services in immediate need there may not have been using the system. So because we have so many actors now, we are able to pick up a lot. But if there are groups who are interested in using the system and are engaged with trying to move people from homelessness into a safer or more secure or housed environment, please send them our direction to see if we can help them use our system so they get the benefit of having that client experience and being able to collaborate with this amazing group of agencies who's currently using it.
Thank you, Lisa. We need to have public comment, so we have 1 minute left, or we can try and stretch it a couple minutes. But Jacob, you have your comment. Jacob True.
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks for giving us a chance to speak. I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to say that a growing coalition of community members and organizations wanted to call on the Eugene City Council to reject the privatization of the 1059 Willamette location. Should be re-examined on the road to solving the housing crisis. I know that we have a meeting on that on the 29th, so I will delay and comment on that more then, but just wanted to point that out in the small amount of time that I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm sorry to rush the questions. I'd like to have a more robust conversation both on what Lisa presented, what Mayor Venice asked about, and what this greater community has done. I appreciate the comment and the updates that we are getting, and I really think that we are doing powerful work as a community that hasn't been done. There will be an email out on the vaccine update that we had requested for this meeting, and so if there's any other questions or any other needs, if there's anything that we need to consider for our next agenda, please send myself or Noreen or Alex an email regarding those items, and we'd be happy to talk. Thank you, everybody, and may you enjoy the sunshine. Meeting adjourned.